It's like a low battery. Do you have a spare USB in your laptop? Good day.
No, not that one. This one.
Hero. Thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Welcome, lecture number 2. And I did test the Starleaf broadcast with the Asana, and if someone in the Starleaf session has a urgent question, then please open your camera and start waving, because that's the only way I can see you. Can someone in that Starleaf say one little thing so that I can know for sure that you still hear me? Okay, yes, thanks a lot. Okay. Well, are we ready to embark on this second lecture? Welcome again. I'm still Ernest, and an important portion of this evening is the break, in which I hope that you continue to establish sort of WhatsApp groups and subgroups and all kinds of other interconnectiveness. In the lecture itself, I will zoom in on something I call theorizing research as a foundation, as a lecture that aims at pointing at certain vocabulary, cluster certain collections of words, and the idea is that such a theorizing foundation helps in subsequent lectures and in discussions with your supervisor and with the literature on how to do research, up to and including YouTube movies on how to write an LLM thesis. And I do hope that you consult that variety of sources. Today has the function to offer you sort of vocabulary that connects the various approaches to research, so that we are not sort of instructing you to just to do it the way the supervisor wishes, but that you have the opportunity, with additional self-study obviously, to navigate your own trajectory through that potentially difficult topic being research. Last time we had an overview of the assessment form, and the intention then, the aim, the goal was to make research concrete, as in tick all the boxes, know how you can interpret such a assessment form so that you can assist your grader assessor in giving you a good grade. So that is a very pragmatic approach, and we will return to that type of approach. Today we move to the other end of the spectrum, as promised, and we probably somewhere in the second hour leave Earth's surface and end up in the clouds and outer space of thinking concepts and stuff like that. When I was your age, I was not familiar with 80% of all those terms I will throw at you. So I do not expect you to have a full swing bachelor philosophy in the pocket in 2 hours. But I do hope that sort of the keywords does start to give you some comfort in that sense. The idea is that in the upcoming lecture we zoom in on the legal research, legal scholarship, and we will translate certain concepts of today to how jurist scholars interpret these terms, like evidence, fact, data, research question. And then in the upcoming session, next session, we will zoom in on classical research methods in the legal industry. And my hope next time is that I can refer back to today and point out that legal scholars are just scholars. And if in the field of scholarship certain ideas exist on what is a question, what is data, what is evidence, what is an argument, that we as jurists are not able, or were not able, to come up with a completely different idea. So my claim is that what I tell you today is applicable next time for us as jurists. And then in the fourth session we will try to return to the sort of pragmatic, quick and dirty level, where I will try to translate sort of the more esoteric theoretical themes to what does this mean for your introduction and your subchapter on methodology and your conclusion in your LLM thesis as a preparation for all the things that will come. Are there any questions in that regard or pertaining to last session of practical or content or social nature? No, if not, that can come later. And let's then move forward. And in moving forward, I wish to point at the existence, the occurrence of the words we use today in the literature you study for the substantive courses. I call them the criminal law course, the EU law course. And so what I do hope, that's my last bullet point, is that in your current study of the substantive courses you already meet research questions, presentations of data, things that is supposedly a analysis, which is one of the words we will discuss today, etc. So in that sense I do hope that already you have multiple connections to the topic of today. And then, last but not least, for this slide, the main chapters of the assessment form that are on the agenda today are the chapter of the research question. So how could we argue that a sentence qualifies as a research question? Not only in Utrecht, but in general. And the second chapter of the assessment form, that is sort of the hidden goal and agenda of today, is the chapter on argumentation. So that makes it concrete. The philosophy, the scholarly discipline that is looking at the questions of today, is called philosophy. And the claim is that we need that discipline to understand the words like research question, analysis, inference, conclusion, to understand what we, legal scholars, mean with it. And philosophy is a slippery topic in the sense that many people like it, study it one way or the other, or did study it, but quite often it is still seen as a separate discipline, which is at best a sort of hobby or extended interest of a legal profession. My claim today is that we need those insights to understand what we are doing. If you do not wish to do it sort of the quick and dirty way, like, well, you say I have to do this, I don't know what it means, but I do it, which is possible, but not the ambition of an LLM program. So for me, philosophy is just one of the disciplines we legal professionals need to know a little bit about. And obviously, disclaimer already said 2 minutes ago, I cannot achieve that in 2 hours, but I will do my best. And one way of doing my best is to drop some names to allow you to do further study. And maybe the most important name is the name of Aristotle, a Greek philosopher of a couple of years ago. And why do I pick Aristotle? Because Aristotle was a fusion kitchen philosopher. So there are many philosophers. And they are quite often well known when they have a single-minded extreme position, as in everything in reality are just atoms and that's all there is. Or Plato, who's claiming that everything you see is an illusion, deal with it. And these two positions are repeated in the course of the centuries, and then not only in sort of the Mediterranean area where many philosophers were traveling around, but also in India, in China, in the Islamic world, to put it that way. So that is a sort of worldwide communication. And each time, each generation, each cycle, there are people like Aristotle who say, wait a minute, so maybe there's some sort of reality or truth in the statement everything is sort of the atoms and materialistic. But I do see other things like love and peace, which are difficult to understand to be sort of atomic or materialistic. So let's not exaggerate and let's allow a multiple understanding of that reality as part of our official philosophical approach. And those types of philosophers are the best to adopt as jurists, because we, in our future jobs, in our future roles, like a judge, like the other professions, we need to deal with real people, real companies, real societies, and we cannot afford to say, dear people in my courtroom, you're all a dream. That doesn't help. So I'm not claiming that Plato is wrong, but I'm claiming that in the average profession, we cannot afford to be this extreme. Like Wittgenstein, who says everything is language. Okay, but I have a car accident. How do I solve the car accident? Thank you very much, Mr. Wittgenstein. So I do claim that there's a sort of tendency of legal professionals in their 9-to-5 job. And so on Sunday and Friday and Saturday, you may believe whatever you want. But in this sort of the rush reality, to favor philosophers that try to combine many sort of realities in one stroke, in one theory. And Aristotle is probably the first who was pretty successful in that. in the sense that the projects, the themes, the topics he did put on the agenda are still the topics your generation colleagues study when they are enrolled in the philosophy program. And so we are still dealing with his heritage, and that is why I like to share with you one of the taxonomies he was fond of, and that was his division in 3 sections of the phenomena of sciences. So learned people were, according to him, either in theoretical sciences active, like logic and natural science and physics and stuff like that, or they were active or are active in practical sciences, defined as ethics for individuals or politics for groups, or in productive sciences, as in agriculture, shipbuilding, medicine, rhetoric, we will come back to that, arts, we will come back to that, engineering, sounds like LLM, innovation, technology and law. And the beauty of this sort of division is that the debate of the legal profession, where are we, could be informed by such a taxonomy, by such a division. And then we could claim that when we produce political structures, constitutions and the like, we are in the practical sciences. When we produce words, then we are in the productive science. Because what I do is I have a product, I even record it, which feels like a product. And to a lesser extent, we are involved in the theoretical sciences, with the exception that the core of what we call argumentation is logic, as I will claim in half an hour. So you could claim that we are in those 3 types of sciences. What is then the purpose to repeat this and to emphasize this? The purpose is that Aristotle thought that different rules and perspectives apply to those 3 flavors of scientific activity or scholarly activity. And that is a helpful insight, because the tendency of humans or groups of humans is to say, no, there should be one. So in the course of the history of philosophy, there's always a battle until the day of today that people want a winner. They want one science that wins, so that we have one format. And the beauty is that already for 3,000 years we know that maybe we should not try to look for just one method, but accept that maybe there are 3 flavors. And if you then open the door, I don't mind to end up with 2 or with 4 or whatever we will find out in the future. But it's a very strong tendency. Most introductory books on how to write a thesis basically silently claim there's just one method. And next week we will look into the battle, sort of research off, like sing off or dance off, between the empirical legal scholars and the doctrinal legal scholars, which both hope and or think that one will win. And maybe we should take a step back and say, well, if already Aristotle and hundreds of other philosophers after him leave the option open that there are multiple flavors, maybe we could consider that. So that is a step 1. And then one other way of looking at philosophy is that it is the art of thinking about thinking. And I claim that doing research has to do with thinking. So let's look at the discipline that knows most about thinking, and which is the philosophical discipline. And then within, just for your Google searches, within philosophy there are many silos. And then the subgroup in that profession that deals with research, most of the time call themselves philosophy of science. scholars. So one source you should consult is the Stanford Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which is sort of the state-of-the-art English language overview of philosophical themes. And one entry is Philosophy of Science. And I mentioned it already, but just to be clear, theorizing is important because on the website of Utrecht University and equal master programs, the claim is that this is sort of the highest degree, and if we are not professional thinkers, who will? And so theorizing / thinking belongs to masters. Secondly, Utrecht University is a so-called research university, so it should be our profession to do so. And I do know that in the job advertisement of your future jobs, it says in one of the bullet points, academic thinking capabilities, which is the capability or talent or competence or ability to use your brain. And let's see how far we get. And most importantly, it is nice to do. And then I like metaphors, so I choose a cube. In staying with Aristotle and the Greeks, I like Greek words. They're expensive, so you get a lot of value for that in your own thesis, maybe. So the hexagonal research taxonomy is the name I gave to the model I will share with you right now. And hexa is just the Greek word for 6. So in a cube there are 6 slates, sides, and the like. And the alternative word is hexahedron, as a opposition to hexagonal, but it means basically the same. And on those 6 sides there are the 6 stages you could theorizing around your LLM thesis, your research project. And the first one is about the project plan, the research question. Look at the question mark in a bit. And then we have the blue philosophical stages connected to ontology, epistemology, and ethics. And then the 5th one is sort of the actual execution of data collection, analysis, and argumentation. And then the last one is the research outcome and advice. And so what I will do right now is go over all these sort of themes. And if you wish, you can picture that as just one side of the cube. And there's no top or bottom, because it depends on how you put the cube. And so they are equally important depending on where you are in a research project. So there's no sort of mandatory order or something like that, because what we will discover and discuss in 2 weeks, in 4 weeks, is the circular nature. And everybody who did already a piece of writing knows that when you reach the conclusion, you go back and start fixing things in the introduction, and so forth. So in the first square, we look at the research question, and there are various ways how you could acquire, adopt, find a research question. And that ranges from someone, your boss, who asks you, research this. Then there's no question mark, because then you get just an instruction, do this. Which is not in line with our ideas of autonomy, etc. So that is why we are, as a university, not doing that. But sometimes supervisors give you tips, and your contacts with lecturers in the substantive courses could have the character to ask those colleagues of mine about interesting topics, etc. But there are 3 more current and more useful and more often occurring reasons for research questions, and that is curiosity, so that you are just a curious person and you want to figure out things. And the second one is the surprise, that you discover something and that you are surprised. I did not know that this and this with consumers or technology or algorithms was the case. Let's figure out how it works. And the last one is shock, which I like most, that you are shocked that certain things in the reality, in our legal reality, in our law and tech reality, is as it is. And that something in your body is sort of signaling words like, this can't be true, you better figure out how it actually is organized, designed, etc., and to do something about it. Well, and that is quite often summarized, those various flavors, into answer the research question. So we make it an abstraction as a sort of instruction. Whatever it takes, get us a research question, and then the whole thesis trajectory is about answering it, full stop. So that's sort of the main instruction. And then another popular way of describing what you will do is the follow a method of inquiry and present the outcome, which is a phrasing you quite often see. And the other one, third one, is try in your LLM thesis to convince your audience about new knowledge, which is also sort of expression of themes we will see tonight. What I did, and I do right now, is that I make a more neutral description of a research project. And that has 4 steps, and the last step has 3 flavors. And that is why I count up to 6. But each research project consists, one way or the other, of a description. A description like a journalist looking into a situation and making pictures and describing what he or she is seeing. No emotion, no thinking, just the diary or journalism like, I see this. That's one. The second ingredient of research is explanation. I hope, neutral word. An explanation means that you explain what you see. And most of the debate is about what do we mean with explanation. Because description, easy. Explanation is the sort of hot tomato. And then, in the scholarly activity, the crucial thing is that you say, okay, this was my explanation. I predict that tomorrow the same will happen. Example. If you're a natural scientist and you deal with gravity, then you describe the rock falls, then you explain with Newton why rocks fall with mass and all kinds of complicated things. And then, explicitly or implicitly, you predict that tomorrow the same gravity will exist and the same rock will fall the same way. And in the other sciences, so the practical sciences and the productive sciences, we do the same. Why? You cannot describe the future. You can only predict the future. And you cannot explain the future because it did not happen. So the only thing, language-wise, you can do is that you can predict. Another example. in law. Let's assume that you look at local national liability law, car accident. Then you can describe, there are laws in place around tort, which makes the person who causes damage to pay the damages of the other party. And then you can explain that such a rule in a local jurisdiction has all kinds of good intentions and practical outcomes and peace in the society, and you can have all kinds of different types of explanations. And then what you do as a jurist, you predict that tomorrow the same rule applies, so that if there is a car accident tomorrow, the chances are 100% that a judge will rule similarly as the judge did in the past. And what we do is that we quite often call that description or explanation, but I want you to adopt a sort of appreciation for the concept past, present, and future. In law and technology, almost all hot themes are in the future. So my prediction is that 90% of all your theses will do the predicting thing. As in, if this type of law enforcement is in a national jurisdiction or in the European directives or the like, then we will not catch enough criminals tomorrow. So that's important. And then, what we also do is that we do not leave it with a prediction, but we are professionals that want to have a say on that future. And we have 3 ways to help listeners, societies, companies, states to deal with that future. And I want to deal with them one by one. And the first way anybody can deal with the future, I call coping or enduring. As in, this is how the law is, this is how gravity is, you better deal with it. And then the behavior of the stakeholders, the Facebook, the European Commission, the national states, in law and technology, and they just have to apply the GDPR better or the liability rules better or consumer law better, because your prediction is it will stay the same. The second flavor, and I dare to predict your favorite flavor, is change. That you conclude, I do not like my prediction, I do not like how the society or the law or the technology or the Facebook or the consumer or whatever in between will operate according to my prediction. So what I advise, recommend, or words of that nature, if you do a little bit like this, if you do a little bit like that, the world will be a better place. This type of advising is also known and derived from how psychologists advise people in their treatment rooms. So the equivalent with alcohol and coping is, okay, you're alcoholic, so better get used to it because you will be drunk every day. That's coping and enduring. The equivalent of change is the advice, maybe you should start drinking less with a sort of trajectory, and then you in the end will not be an alcoholic anymore. And then the third flavor is sort of the plus package of change. That is then called transformation, or words of that nature, reconstruction. And that is that you, in the example of the psychologist, that the advice is you know, you should better move to a farm in Nepal and become a Buddhist monk and then transform your world and your life into something drastically different. And there's obviously just a measure of degree in the various types of advice. And it's a continuum, it's a spectrum. And what changes for one person is transformation for another person. But what also is in the realm of the transformation are new technologies. So for me, in this taxonomy, in this list, when we start dreaming of new technologies, new algorithms, then we get a completely different world. Example, cars and transportation. So in the old days, cars was an object of desire and it was sort of handy that you could move from A to B, but it involved all kinds of independent decisions and choices leading to all kinds of car accidents. And the prediction is that there will be a transformation, and that we are already witnessing a transformation towards a situation where a car is not owned by yourself, is completely automated, and brings you as a means of transportation from A to B without accidents because of all kinds of new technology. And that is just an example in our LLM world, an example of sort of transformative type of advice. So this is potentially helpful in the trajectory, in the sense that when you are dealing with a chapter, one of the things I ask my students is this a chapter that deals with the description, or is this a chapter that deals with the prediction? And one way of designing a fluent text is that you are not mixing all those 6 flavors each page. So that you avoid that the reader is sort of witness of a tennis match, and that one alinea is descriptive, and then the next one is explanation, and then you jump to a prediction, and then you start describing again. And so one way of adopting this is to say, well, maybe I need 4 chapters. In one I just describe, these technologies exist, these laws exist, don't shoot the messenger. Then you move to the next chapter and you say, okay, let me try to explain. And then there's no tradition of a predictive chapter, so that's then sort of the last paragraph of the explanation, that you say, well, most likely my explanation will hold tomorrow. And then we do have a very large tradition of advising. And maybe you can make it a tiramisu menu, that you say, okay, we might try to cope, but in the plus package we might change a little bit, and we have the plus package of transformation. So you can streamline your advices. And why? There's another reason, not the thesis, but your bosses and clients and the like, they dislike transformation because that is expensive. So they do like when you have something to offer in the first advice category, like cope with it and you will do fine. And so don't be too enthusiastic. So when there is an opportunity to claim, well, it's not all bad, make that explicit. So one of the things students miss are the open goals and points. The obvious. So make obvious things explicit if it fits in a sort of logic and you can sort of collect points. Then the second, third and fourth square are the more philosophical squares. And they listen to the name of ontology, which is the expensive word for the study about the types of views on the reality that exist, ranging from everything is a dream to everything is atom, including my voice. Second one, epistemology, which is the expensive Latin, Greek name for the study of knowledge. So what does count as knowledge? How do we know what knowledge is, etc.? And then ethics is the technical term of moral philosophy, the enterprise that, talking about the future, is stating things about value, both personally, wrong and right, or collectively, in terms of the design of society, politics. So, footnote, ethics does not mean doing the right thing, as in do not break the law. We do not need a word for do not break the law, and especially not a word called ethics, which in the discipline of philosophy means something similar to I'm a private law jurist or a company law jurist. So on birthday parties of philosophers, they ask, are you in the ontology, or are you in epistemology, or are you in ethics? Which does mean that they study that theme of right and wrong between 9 and 5 as a profession. The reason to emphasize this is that in the Netherlands there seems to be a sort of tendency, especially among jurists, to say things like do the ethical thing, and then they mean don't break the law. And in a jurist community, I think that's a very strange phrasing, because our theory is, from the start, don't break the law. We don't need an extra word. Okay. One, ontology. There are not only two views, but there are 4 views, at least. So, Formism is the idea that everything is a preset form, and everything we see is the sort of the mirror of that idea. So we are in a dream, so you're not real, but you're just a copy of a certain form, and then philosophers point up somewhere in the sky, or in a divine, or somewhere there. They're sort of the essence, and what we see is just not real. Then material, the flavor called mechanism claims that everything is material and everything can be explained via this atomic approach, and we are just part of a big machine, as an individual, as a society, and that the extreme form of this worldview denies the existence of free will. So many people are materialists and mechanists up to the point that that theory claims, well, if everything is caused by cause and effect, then also your free choice is caused by something. And then we jurists, lawyers think, that's not our party, because our law has a sort of free will, free choice concept on many spots. But it is a very dominant worldview, and we will meet that. And then the third one is organism, or the view that everything is subject to change, and that we are just little seeds that become plants, and then we die, and then that we are all part of a circular thingy, which can be small or large, like societies are organic and they grow and they have a purpose and they have a goal towards excellence. And the Greek word for excellence is arete, and the English translation of arete is virtue. Most of you think of virtue as an old-fashioned word, but the technical version of it means the excellent version of an organism like a human or a society, and there is a sort of goal, a telos, a teleological movement towards it, which is a very popular view among many people. And then the last view, contextualism, is the view that we do not know what the reality is, but that there can be consensus in a community, and that on the basis of that consensus we say, okay, reality exists, I don't know, but let's accept it. A variation of contextualism is called positive law, in the sense of positivism, that we claim law is just what is in the sources. There's no other thing to it. There's no purpose, there's no goal. Law is just what people decide law is, and that's it. And you can apply that to everything in reality, up to and including a LLM thesis. That you say, human beings cannot say anything sensible about what it is, but there's a consensus. On the 1st of July, you hand in one. Don't beat me, and don't ask further questions. And the beauty of all those perspectives is that, one, they can explain everything. So Plato and all his followers, up to the day of today, can explain how reality works while it is all a dream. You can explain everything, maybe with exception of free will, with the mechanistic approach. They say free will is just a hormone which gives you the illusion that you choose. The other department, called economics, they make that to their sort of holy grail, rational choice theory, and they say free will doesn't exist. We are all toys of structures and mechanisms, and part of consumer law protection law is based on that idea that we should be protected to sort of the mechanistic dealing of Google and Facebook and the like with us. Organism can also explain everything, and contextualism also. So you will be confronted with this theme when you are describing and especially explaining the law of your thesis. Is that just a tool to reach a certain thing? Or is that a organically growing thingy towards something? Or is it just coincidence? Or is it the mirror of the ultimate justice that is part of the dream we are part of? And the same applies to technology. And so in a mechanistic worldview, technology is just perfect because it just enhances the working of the atoms and gravity and transportation and the like. But in Formism, it's maybe not meant to be, whatever that may be. And I claim that most human beings on the globe are raised in Formism, because religion, for instance, is pure Formism. It says there's a story about the world with a divine, an afterlife, or not afterlife, and all kinds of rules that follow that sort of design. And what I want to be very explicit about is that that is okay, that we are all raised in those various forms. Why? Because half of the problems jurists deal with are caused by it. So we should stop not looking at it and give it names like, well, that is Formism, and try to see whether we can sort of open up the debate and make it more precise, etc. Okay. Then epistemology. Epistemology is then the study of knowledge. and it deals with the keywords, with the word knowledge, with the word fact, with the word data, with the word phenomena, reality, interpretation, opinion, ID. And again, it's a battlefield, and one warrior, Mr. Aristotle, introduced a sort of dichotomy, a twofold conceptual thing, and that is that there is reality in the reality, doxa, in Greek, or proof, so physical or objects that are, which can be perceived with our senses, eyes, ears, smell, and Aristotle already introduced the idea that there's also a reality consisting of words, lexis in Greek. And there you already have a twofold approach, the apodictic approach, so a focus on sensible evidence, and the focus, the dialectic, which word pops up in many flavors, but the root meaning is knowledge conversation around words. Dia is a proposition around words. And I believe that when you look at the history of philosophy of science and jurisprudence or philosophy of law, and that in our area there seems to be sort of consensus that part of our work is about words. So part of our reality is dialectic. So we battle around words. And that will return next week with the doctrinal method, which is sort of the cousin of this concept of dialectic. And the idea is that in a dialectic approach of knowledge, you can reach knowledge. So it is not or, it is not either apodictic or dialectic, but it can be both. Remember, Aristotle was a fusion kitchen philosopher. He tries to bring peace in sort of the battle of the world. The link with your thesis is that you claim that you produce new knowledge. Your text will be unique and will be consisting of words, and that will be called new knowledge. Let me move to an ingredient of epistemology, and an ingredient is logic. And logic is a word that is often used, but the bottom line is that it is just the label of how we organize our thoughts in our brain and in our language. So you can study logic and you can have a degree in it, but bottom line, logic is nothing more than the name of what we do when we make meaningful sentences and statements. Nothing more, nothing less. When you have a degree in logic, you want to sell it and make it very special. You say, no, it's a sui generis human affair, and it's very complicated. But it's not, because as of age 1, you use logic 24/7. So that's one. 2, there are many types of taxonomies, labels within logic, and there are 2 that you need to remember, and that is introduced by Aristotle, the difference between deduction and induction. And those are ways of functioning of our brains that we use every day. So we are very familiar with it. But the moment it is in a YouTube clip or in a book on logic, and you see all A's are B's and A is an A, so the small a is a B, then most people panic. So the way of expressing the rules of logic is a little bit like we in our profession. So when we are on a birthday party, people think we are very talented because we can say complicated things. And so we do a trick with our audiences. And logicians do the same trick. And now we are the victim. And I invite you to not freak out and do a little bit of study and accept that the original concepts are very simple. And they align well with Formism and mechanism. So deduction is that you start with a rule like all white beans are from that bag, and 99% of law is deductive. We have a rule, don't kill, drive on the right side, etc. And then, with the rule in your pocket, you move to the reality, to the case, and you pick one bean, S, the subject, which is white. And then you do the inference jump. Then you do what humans can, and that is, based on this premise, based on this rule, and based on this one bean, I conclude that the whole bag is filled with white beans. That's deduction. In law, you have a rule, don't kill, you have evidence, the case, a knife, a victim, a dead body, and then you jump to the conclusion, to the result, and you say, this victim, or this suspect is the cause of the death and should be punished. Deduction. And then, induction is not the other way around, but a variation. Then you start with the evidence, the case. So you look at the white bean from the bag, and you take another white bean from the bag, and then you take another white bean from the bag. And then you claim that you derive a rule from all the white beans in your hand, in your laboratory, and you claim the rule will be that all the beans will be white. So the result is the whole bag is full of white beans. Those are the two main flavors of functioning of our brain. And until the day of today, philosophers quarrel and kill each other verbally in a sort of attempt to claim which flavor is best. And in the history of philosophy of science, there are all kinds of phases and variations and conclusions that the human brain is not able to declare a winner. So based on thinking alone, we cannot argue that one way is better than the other. And that opens the door to variations, and the most important one is called abduction. Maybe we can deal with that next time, but that is a variation which involves not the truth and certainty, but a hypothesis. Abduction is just a name for, let's not exaggerate, let's just claim I have an idea, also known as an hypothesis, that if we find white beans in the bag, then most likely the rule will be that all beans in the bag will be white. And that is, in natural science, the main method, because it leaves room for error and correction. Like Mr. Popper, who said falsification. And so you move from one hypothesis to the other. And since this is such an important one, I will return to it. But first I need to mention hermeneutics, the methods that are labeled in the social sciences and in the humanities, where there are no beings, there are just words. And hermeneutics means nothing more than interpreting words. And then paintings count as words and pieces of art. And hermeneutics is a neutral word. It's the intellectual process of trying to understand the meaning of things. And then there are two flavors. One, the flavor labeled recovery. And then you try to find the intention of the author of the words. So you try to establish what the original meaning of the words, or the piece of art, or the legislation means. And that is 70% what we legal professionals do. We try to interpret what the words mean in the realm of law. Hard law, soft law, case law, doctrine. We try to understand. We try to recover what is it, what it means. And then the most challenging flavor of hermeneutics is a hermeneutics of suspicion. And that is that you say we are victims of a conspiracy. And I just want to mention two facts in legal history. One, early 20th century, that constitutions were changed and women got voting rights. That was the result of hermeneutics of suspicion. Because everybody, non-female, thought this is how formistic is meant to be. Women should be in the kitchen, which is a very formistic approach. And the Constitution says so. And hermeneutics of suspicion means that as a scholar you read that phrase in the Constitution where it says male voting only, and you say, I suspect that this is the expression of a wrong idea. And then the conclusion is, okay, let's change. But that is in research projects, another thing. And the other example is in the 50s, my mother, when she married, she lost her authority of her bank account. Because in the Netherlands, a very progressive country, we thought that husbands were very well equipped to manage the bank account of their wives. And the law said so. And with hermeneutics of suspicion, that is changed. And in a law and technology LLM, I predict that many of you will mobilize hermeneutics of suspicion. As in, we do love Facebook, but maybe we should be suspicious. Hermeneutics of recovery is, well, the headquarters in Ireland of Facebook thought of a new product and how lovely it is. Question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, would you say that hermeneutics of suspicion is more of a kind of a challenging approach to what is described?
Yeah, so there are theories of conspiracies. There was a person called Karl Marx, and he thought that whatever we see is a conspiracy of the haves against the haves not. Everything he saw, he was able, in his theory, to explain in terms of this is because you're a have or a have not. There is, in feminism, a theory that says that everything that is wrong is because of male human beings. And quite often, that's true. So empirical research, whatever that may mean, discovered that male human beings make less car accidents. How do we know? The insurance premium for female insured people is lower. Just as an example, that feminists are right. And those frameworks are quite often mobilized in academia to justify hermeneutics of suspicion. And that can be described with challenging approach or the like. Oh. And then last, and then we will have a small break. Ethics is about the values. And there are many value systems. And with A, B, C, D, I indicate the main ones. And A is deontology, which is the idea that there is a source and that dictates what is right, what is wrong. For 70% of human beings on the globe, that source is a divine. And for the rest, that source is the idea of property or the idea of rights. Those are all deontological views of values. And how does it work? Based on such set of principles, you can explain in the reality what is right and what is wrong. Law is for 99% deontologically organized. Because the law says killing is wrong, and with that tool we can decide in a concrete case whether a person is right or wrong. So that is a very dominant and quite often helpful approach of values. The second one is consequentialism, which is another word for utilitarianism. And that is the idea that the only thing that is right is the action of an individual that maximizes the welfare of the most people. So everything we do should be subject to a calculation whether in lecturing you I foster the welfare of a maximum of people. The third one is the virtue ethics, or arhetaic ethics, meaning the ethics geared at the individual. So deontic is from outside inside, and virtue ethics is from the inside outward. That is the ethics that says, if you work on your own development, that's right. And existentialism could be framed as a variation of that, which says, very popular in your generation, that there's a sort of unique thingy inside you, and that you should follow that unique thingy and express that in your choices. And you're the author of what is right and what is wrong. And then we have the fourth flavor, and that is the concentric or consensus ethics, similar to contextualism, that says no human being can say anything sensible about values, but let's talk with each other, sounds like democracy, and decide per year, per society, per territory what is right and wrong, without steamy claims about divines or that we calculated that our actions are very good for people in Philippines, etc. So that brings me to the most important part of the evening. 11.5 minutes. See you in a bit.